When you listen to the singing of the national anthem, yeah, Nkosi Sikelela,
blah, 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 yeah.
and then, yay, ate the blow. Oh no, see a Kolisi, man, it's you got, it's like,
Absolutely.
Let that sink in. He's not the greatest black captain. No, he's the greatest captain of the Springboks ever. You sign up on a piece of paper, you get fired on a text.
You thought that there was an attempt made on your life with the third. Do you still believe that was the case?
100%.
Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX, and a shout out to Pace Car Rental, who have brought this episode to you today. Use promo code SMWX to get 10% off your car hires. Today is a landmark day for our channel because we are joined by a broadcaster who needs no introduction. Robert Marawa has graced our screens and the airwaves from his life on a farm all the way to renowned shows. He is probably the preeminent figure in South African media over the last 2 decades. In my view, anyway. Maybe that's just because I'm a big soccer fan, or maybe that's because he has donned radio, TV, and the digital world with aplomb. None other than Mr. Robert Marawa. We thank you very much for joining us today. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Wow. Thanks, Doc. Thank you very much indeed. I think it's an honor for me to be here. When you're always watching your show and you're seeing the top level guests that come into here to talk about, the kind of discourse that I think the country needs. I always say we need that independent voice. And I think you've given that opportunity for that independence to sway through. So congratulations to you as well.
Wow, thank you. I'm going to take those words and put them directly on my CV.
If they space, I think your CV is already littered.
That's just the CV. Just that. No, it's a real honor. Part of what we're trying to do on this show is just elevate those who need to be elevated. Sure, we need to also criticize those who need to be criticized, but when I read the book that you and Mandy Wiener put together and in preparation for this interview, I look at the work you've put in. It's something to behold. It's something to behold. So. Well,
thank you. I mean, it's part of a dream. I mean, you mentioned the farm, you mentioned Gandla. What do you do when you in environments like that except to dream? You dream in between herding cows and shearing sheep. You dream in between watering the garden where you're growing the vegetables and the mealies, and you're dreaming in between trying to see if you can get a borehole because rivers are running dry, and you start to find a way of seeing where your dream lies. And my dream was always to be a lawyer, as everyone knows. I didn't quite achieve that. One of these dropouts that we all proudly talk about, but still dreams though, again, are finishing because I'm so much closer to getting my degree than I am from not, so it's one of those that I always thought I would repay my parents and say, you guys sacrificed so much. You put me through school, then you put me through university. Unfortunately, my dad's no longer with us. My mom's there, 88-year-old, very strong woman. If there was a present that I would probably give her, would be for me to just finish off the degree and proudly wear the gown and say, thank you, this is for you. Because I always felt somewhat that, yes, I pursued my dream and what I believe was my calling within broadcasting. And I sort of sidetracked the education part, sidetracked what the conversations we had with my parents to say, what is it that you really want to do, my boy? And then I silently went into this trip, and the first time they got to know or hear of it was on the night I was going to be going on Simunye. And I said, listen, watch television. There might be somebody that who you'll see there. And that was the first time they got to know. Yeah, because I was scared of telling them before, because I knew there would be a backlash. I knew that this was not part of the plan, and what is this TV thing? What are you going to do? How are you going to earn a living? So I was scared of all those conversations. So I thought, let me just do it my way. If it crashes my way. I'll have to find a way of nursing those bruises, though, from their side.
So you would consider actually completing the law degree?
I would. I mean, we look around, the young generation, we look around at you, Doc, and what you've done. You might not know what an inspiration that means to people that you don't know, because you operate in a space where you're visible, but the invisible people are the ones who are being motivated every day and saying, oh, geez, he can do it. Okay, what's a credible university overseas to go to so that I can complete, to get my PhD, doctorate, and so on. And there's nothing as strong and as powerful as having an education and being equipped with an education. Because you can pursue whatever you want to pursue, but knowing that you've got this with you, then you can ultimately become the person you were meant to be then at a later stage in your life. And I really want to do that. And I think also, just for me, why not? I mean, I've journeyed so far, and for me to just completely forget about it, the credits are there. I think I'm just a couple of half-year courses away from finishing.
Wow.
That's it. Yeah.
No, you've got to do it, actually.
No, I have to. I've got to find the time.
You're probably an expert in the law of contract by now. So.
Jeez, yeah. Half the contracts I've been in didn't see the way until the end. Yeah.
Life is funny like that, because the older I'm getting, the more you realize there's so many scenarios and you can only pick one. Yeah. I'm kind of in a similar moment now where I'm like, do I go the law route, or this broadcasting thing is so interesting? And when I see your story, it also gives me hope that, like, you don't have to do the traditional law thing. Can work, but there are people who have also done amazing things in the broadcasting world. So it's funny how you're thinking of doing the law, and I'm like, wow, but you're an example of broadcasting. Yeah. No, I mean, it's strange. I was also, I think at the time, obviously I was doing laws at varsity already, but the one thing that maybe sprung my insomnia that I still struggle with till today was the O.J. Simpson trial, because that was broadcast wall to wall. And because of the time difference, America and South Africa, you had to watch it pretty late. But I think the work that your Rob Kardashians, your Johnny Cochrans of this world put in, I was just amazed at his ability to legally use the tools that are available to him to see somebody who a lot of people in the world said he was guilty, but then if you're using the right tools and you're using a glove, for example, that he used right up until the end, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. And, but we all know that leather and blood, the glove shrinks. So there's no way it's going to fit after all of that. He was just amazing. And I just thought jurisprudence, I just thought to myself, maybe this is what I was a quiet kid. I was not somebody who was very loud. I was one of these shy kids, very quiet. You wouldn't even know I existed. But one thing I did was observe. So I observed, and a lot of the time growing up, I was surrounded by pretty influential people, because in KZN, of course, he's there, and then you go and you visit Nkosi, and you go and, there's Sheng, who was very close to my grandfather. Yes, of course. The late himself was a bishop, and then and then he became the Speaker of the House in the Legislative Assembly in KwaZulu-Natal. And there was Dr. Marius Spies, who was also heavily influential, and somebody who was guiding and vice versa, guided with my grandfather. So there were all these individuals that I somehow found intriguing. And when you want to suck some wisdom from people like that, they probably just thought, this kid. But I was silently listening to the conversations, hearing them talk, understanding what the discourse was. And I was probably about 10, 11. I mean, I'll show you a photo at the end that just depicts when we were celebrating my grandfather's 80th birthday. And all of these men, Dr. Frank Mdlalosa, Dr. Oscar Zlomo was there. And, my dad, Marius Spies, and my grandfather. So it was just always about, wow, these are great men. These are great men who yield and hold great power. What makes them different? Obviously I was not of the opinion of giving whether you're IFP or ANC, that didn't matter. For me, this was my world, and that's the world that I found myself in. So what do I learn from the people that I find myself surrounded by? And I think a lot of my early learnership had to do
with the contribution subliminally that came through from them.
Absolutely. I mean, you've taken in a lot of these influences. It builds you up to wanting to study law. You end up in broadcasting, but I'm also thinking that in some ways they're very similar things. You're using language. You're sometimes cross-examining.
Yeah.
You're putting across a case. And so the two seem very different, but they often rely on similar skill sets, research.
Yeah. No, spot on, because the guests that come through, so you find that, yes, I do sport. And I always told people that's the difference, so when I was brought in the one time to Supersport, and, there was something that I'd said on the radio show, and they were very angry with me for having said that. I always said, but guys, when you got me to come and work here, you knew I was doing radio. So what I do on radio is completely different to what I do on television. Television, I'm faced with live football games, whether it's Champions League, local Premiership games in South Africa, World Cup, Africa Cup of Nations, you name it. Yeah. That is live football. So there's no space there to involve the politics of the game. So there's no way I would have said that. So that is why even in the book, when I refer and I say, but guys, there is no Supersport FM. Is that why are you taking what I've said on radio to influence what is happening on television?
Yeah.
Because I do think that's unfair. And you guys have been part of this journey from day one. It was all that. And going back to your question is that my learnership that I got, again, educationally from learning law and studying law was the ability to interrogate until you get the facts. But it's about the preparation. It's about the investigation. You don't just go there with an emotional baggage. You interview, having the privilege of, for the first time, I remember Jerome Valk, who was then the Secretary General of FIFA, saying to me, Robert, listen, there's no way Sepp Blatter is going to come to your studio. He doesn't do one-on-one radio interviews. And I said, come on, Jerome, it can happen. I've worked with Sepp. We did a couple of the World Cup draws together. He might seem amenable to it. He says, give me one day. The next day he says, we are on.
Wow.
And the whole Sepp Blatter came to the SABC.
Yeah.
In the same way the whole Nelson Mandela came to the SABC. Yeah. So it's also what I call, from a Ngandla perspective, inkani. When you're hard-headed and you want, it's not for me. I'm wanting those caliber of individuals for the audience, for the audience to be closer to the people, because the first thing you do with a Madiba is, what on earth are you going to speak to him? You do a sports show. I say, no, it's fine. It's easy. Hansi Cronje phoned you after the cheating case, the match fixing case, picked up the phone. There was the whole incident of you being taken to court by the rugby masters who thought they could interrogate you. So I want to find out more about that, how you felt. As somebody who had been in prison for 27 years, now you being taken back to court again. And I said, transformation. Also you're a former boxer. So there's a lot of sports that we all talk without us having to talk about politics, but it leans towards that. A lot of those conversations, funny enough, are still conversations that are being had today. So the whole split, you go to a rugby game and you listen to the singing of the national anthem. Yeah, Nkosi Sikelel,
blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
And then, yay, 80 blow.
Yay, that blow.
That is 80 blow, and the test matches are coming back.
Yeah.
And we're going to go through the same thing. So I then question myself to saying, are South Africans really aligned? Do we still want to show that division? Why don't you sing the anthem from the beginning with the same fervor as when it gets to a certain point that favors you? Then again, it shows that you're still a divided nation. And there's no greater time to showcase that than what we're seeing globally right now. So intertwine sport and politics, it is there. And people say sports and politics don't mix. They do, because how do you separate them?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I was once interviewing the rapper Dumi from Dumi and the Volume, later Stogie T. And I had released an album where I was speaking specifically about political things. And he was like, I like the album, but you don't need to go so direct if you want to reach people, because people aren't waking up and thinking about politics all the time. Like, talk about life, and then politics is in life. And I was so interested in like his artistic perspective, and I think that's a lot about what you do too. You are often talking about sport, but within sport there's society, there's law, there's politics.
Always. I don't think people realize how damaging the system was. Just to normal South Africans, ordinary South Africans, majority of South Africans. And those that always say, but why are you mixing politics and sport? And you say, but we wouldn't have been banned internationally if the political messaging that was going through to the world was the right one. So now that we've tried, and great leaders like the late Steve Tshwete, who was the first Minister of Sports in this country, did the best that he can. And that's why he cried tears when South Africa, the Proteas, went to play in India. And he says he never cried at Robben Island, but now he cries as a result of the significance of what it means to have a South Africa leaving these shores to go and play a test match in India. So when you find those stories, and also just stories of forgotten heroes, the Kalamazoo Mokonis of this world that had to also leave, but they're much revered elsewhere in Holland, and they've got stadiums and roads named after them. And those are people that we don't even know till today, because South Africa doesn't open its eyes to some of those heroes. But luckily enough, again, because we dig to try and find those individuals so that they give their story and not just talk about them when their life has come to an end. And I was glad that the president also gave him the Order of Ikamanga as a result of the frequent conversations that I started having with him. He was now based in Washington, in Seattle, but he was more than happy, a very forthright person, very straight talker. And those are people that I think would have been great leaders of associations, great leaders within football, for example, in this country, to steer it in a certain direction. Because I don't think we use the intellectual capacity that we do have here, to make the sport an even greater sport in many different ways.
Do you, firstly, we need to award you the Order of Ikamanga for what you did to Roland Schoeman.
My goodness. Wow.
But it just shows, like, you speak about the era of South Africa being banned. We're going into a dicey moment in the world right now, and sport is again bubbling up in our society, and you have people who are unfairly criticizing South Africa from within South Africa, and it's just a strange place where it feels like people are almost identifying with those who are trying to tear us down rather than actually identifying with their own country.
I think, Caesar, that was always going to happen. When you've played your cards and you've had the privileges that you've had, you've played your cards up until they are exhausted. You find yourself maybe experiencing poverty because you took it for granted that these privileges will be everlasting. Those privileges were never going to be everlasting. So now you look for help elsewhere. Roland Schoeman is someone that I've always admired because of what he's achieved. I mean, you win a gold medal in Athens for a relay. That is massive. You win gold medals at world championships. That is massive. You respect people like that. You interview people like that. You talk very proudly about people like that. But also now, when it suits your narrative and you've got citizenship dual here and there, and you're in Arizona and you're an estate agent and you're doing well, so now why are you coming to mess around with the country that is still trying to panel beat its way towards an existence that is fair for many people? So I took a very strong exception to him, and I know that he tried to give a reverse psychology answer and trying to make me the bad person, started digging into my personal life and posting it. but also just about things that were not true. And, if he had followed court procedures and seen the outcomes of some of those things, he'd realize that he's actually the fool, because there was none of those things. And that's why I disengaged, because when you enter now into a pigsty, you're going to end up the same way as the inhabitants of those places. But the message from my side was very clear, and you have to be respectful towards your country. And you can't just now start slating people, saying those kinds of words and calling, so it's an us and an them. They this. Oh, but when you were getting your medals and you were singing the anthem, and that's why I asked him about singing the anthem. I did that deliberately because of that division. But you were being a proudly South African person. So what has happened now? Why didn't you speak before a Donald Trump, for example, came into power? Why didn't you say these things when the Democrats were in power? So people are very opportunistic with what they do in the public space, but also highly, highly irresponsible. And I think he's been one of those highly responsible people.
Agreed. It's scary how at the moment it feels like people feel very emboldened. And suddenly we're starting to see people's true face and all of this stronger together stuff that we heard.
Stronger together. I think I criticized that even then, even before all of this that is happening.
And it was
now.
very unpopular to do it then when there was a big...
because people like this falsehood of guess and guess and krach and so on. And it's nice, you'll be there, you'll sing your shosholoza, you'll sing one sentence, and but you don't know what you're saying, But had you taken the time to actually know what it means, and it has to do with the whole migration from rural people coming to the city to build railway tracks and railway lines and, make it highly urbanized. And those were really songs from the heart. And nothing wrong with singing them in rugby. They sing them in football and so on. But all I'm saying is that it takes more than that.
Absolutely.
Because the minute you've sung that divisive anthem, you already have played your cards. But had it not been for the big fight about transformation, and then sometimes people selectively now start to talk about quotas. There's no such thing as quotas that exist anymore.
Thank you.
The people that play sport, they play sport because they are good at playing sport. If there is a white kid that cannot be selected for the Proteas, he is selected because there's a better kid that is there and who might happen to be black. Or if there's a great rugby player who's black and he's excluded, and there's a white kid, is because the white kid is better. So let's not try and twist these narratives to make it look like we have the best, So the only rugby player in the history of South African rugby to have scored a try at a Rugby World Cup remains Makazola Mapimpi. Not the first black, but the first rugby player, period. Because sometimes we want to add on the fact, no, he's the first black. No, he was the first South African rugby player to have scored a try. That is it. It's a fact. You can't change that. And when we win these back-to-back World Cups, who are the key players, including the captain? So the greatest captain ever in the history of South African rugby happens to be, again, a black kid who was never given a chance, was highly criticized. People did not want to see him on the field. But now, oh no, Siya Kolisi, man, it's like, okay, now the narrative has changed because he's able to win and he has surpassed and he is now the greatest that we've ever had.
Absolutely.
Let that sink in. He's not the greatest black captain. No, he's the greatest captain of the Springboks ever.
Your response to Roland Schoeman, it took me a while to actually figure out what it meant when you were speaking about if there wasn't inclusivity, you wouldn't have got those medals. But it's true.
It is.
Because if South Africa was still banned and we hadn't brought ourselves out of that disaster that was apartheid, there wouldn't have been an opportunity to swim for South Africa in the first place.
Yeah.
So you can't get the medals and then rail against the transformation of the sport, which actually put you in that position in the first place.
Yeah, but that's where now you show how naive you are. That's how you realize that you're dealing with somebody who just is on a personal mission. to destroy all the changes that have been made in this country. And it's difficult, yes. Well, I mean, you can always talk about how we've also stuffed up the country in a way, in many, many ways. But let's talk about on a sporting front. You know, here is somebody who now wants to claim glory in the one hand, but doesn't want to acknowledge the journey towards him being able to stand and sing a united anthem. You know, maybe he needs to go back to the history where the National Sports Council, you know, last minute meetings with the late former president, Nelson Mandela, to try and make a decision about the anthem, to try and make a decision about the emblem. You know, so the Proteas was Springboks, but the Protea became the national symbol and emblem. They had to have a compromise with rugby, where they were going to have half Protea, half Springbok. And those are from very tough negotiations because people held very firm views about these things. So you can't all of a sudden say, oh, you know, it's just the Bokke. Yeah, it is that, but the Bokke back then was the same team that a Donny Craven was saying no black person will wear a Springbok jersey. You know, and that is why I find it so difficult to say the name when Stellenbosch Football Club are playing at the Donny Craven Stadium, because I'm like, how's this still being referred to by this guy's name? You know, that should be done. It should be called something completely different, because there's some things that leave personal scars. Yes, we've moved on. Yes, we've done so, whatever. But also, you can't move on when certain things are a reminder of what brought about the segregation. You know, so sometimes you're very quick to forget. And somebody like Roland did that, and he did that deliberately. You were never going to be on an Olympic podium because that's a new flag of South Africa. That's a new South African flag that you were draped in. So how does then your narrative change now all of a sudden, where you don't realize that it had to take political will, it had to take uniformity for us to then be readmitted into world sport? Otherwise, we would be playing, sure, maybe breakaway and swim for whoever you wanted to swim for. But for South Africa, you needed to have that authority. Otherwise, IOC were never going to understand who and what it is. And the Olympic Games were never going to happen for him.
You went to Hilton College, and as someone who went to St. John's, a similar kind of school, I can't imagine what it must have been like at a place like Hilton in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
You know, when I was at school, I matriculated in 2006, even then, St. John's was a place where there were very few black students.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot now. But what was the experience of being at one of South Africa's premier elite schools on the one hand, during apartheid on the other, and being a black student there at that time like for you? And how have you negotiated it since then?
Yeah, wow. I mean, you take me back to, and these things obviously don't relate now, you know, because if you have a son and you have to make a decision in terms of where he's going to go, and you have to have an open mind about that decision.
Absolutely.
You know, a father cannot then take whatever he thought was the wrongs done to him at a particular time and use that to scupper somebody else's chance.
Absolutely.
I mean, Caesar, I was, again, fresh from the farm. I went to a little flower school, Eshowe. We did two sports there. We played soccer and we ran athletics. So you make a big jump, huge jump. I had no idea what rugby was. I had no idea what they were doing with the ball. I had no idea what water polo was. I had no idea what swimming was. And that is why I even said in the book, till today, and I'm not proud of it, but I still can't swim. Despite the 5 years that I spent at the school, where I think if you're paying those fees, somebody should have said, hey, man, listen, you know, extra lessons, we can take you through. But we were isolated and made to sit there in the pool and dip our feet in the water.
Sure.
You know, so I took exception to that. Obviously, in hindsight, when I thought about it after school, I had no idea what hockey was. I had no idea what cricket was. I mean, for me, that is the most complicated thing, but you almost pushed into playing it, and then you must score. So I don't know what I'm scoring because I've not been exposed to the sport. This is new. you know, and I'm not even exaggerating. I have no idea. The primary school, a Little Flower, you know, German mission school, didn't have any of those different sporting codes. So I'm starting everything from scratch. I'm learning what this means. I'm learning what this rugby is. I'm trying to find now a sport to play. I've tried the cricket because I'm not understanding it, and nobody's really taking time to make me understand what it is. So I have no knowledge. Okay, the wicket, this, and you have to score. There's all sorts of dynamics that, sure, I don't know. So fast forward, I choose to play hockey because it's something close to soccer, but with a stick, you know, so I then choose to play hockey. But then again, it's just like, no. I do a bit of tennis, and I think my saving grace was basketball. And basketball came, and I had no idea again what basketball was. You know, I used to watch Inside Stuff, and I think that kind of propelled me because of the anchor who anchored Inside Stuff, the NBA show, to then do the Soccer Zone show when I ultimately got to the SABC. But basketball for me was like, okay, I'm sure I can work my way through this. As blind as I am with it, but let's see how we can do. And it became really my saving grace. I played basketball. I played first team for 2 years. I captained it in my last year, then played for Natal Midlands. Wow. And I was selected to play there. Got my colors for basketball and so on. And, you know, so for me, that gave me like a moment. Like, okay, here's something that I can relate to. And I also played rugby. We eventually ended up playing rugby. Eventually got to understand what rugby is and what it means. And people said, no, man, you must use your height. You can be a lock. So I became a lock. Ended up playing for the second team in the scrum. Bob Skinstad was there with me.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, obviously, as everyone knows, he went to become the Springbok captain.
Yeah.
And somebody that I kept a very good friendship and closeness even post-school. Wow. You know, he was just a very open, direct human being.
Yeah.
You know, Bob was and still is, I know he's moved to the UK, a straight shooter, but very open in his views. So I took a stance that I would not go back to the school once I'd left. Wow. So there was a 20-year reunion. And I told my friends, guys, listen, go have fun, go and enjoy. Think about me while you're having your fun. So I didn't. So because of all this anger that I'd had, I didn't see the need why I must go back. So 20th anniversary, I'm not there. Then the school now, obviously my profile from a broadcasting perspective starts to grow in a way. And, you know, you're doing all of these shows on Supersport and everything. Then I start to get invited to be a guest speaker at the assembly and a keynote speaker and so on. So I look at that, and again, I don't respond because my heart is not there. I still feel that particular pain. It's an individual thing. So then I didn't respond and I carried on. I mean, to tell you the honest truth, so I left the school in 91 and I only physically returned through its gates last year in October. So everything and anything, no Hilton Michael House, no nothing. That was going to drag me there. But I had a conversation with George Harris, the headmaster. And I think he was also very keen because he's also very open-minded. He's somebody who, with the work they've done in Rustenburg and the Northwest and so on, carries with him an aura of respectability, somebody who has a listening ear, somebody who has South Africa at heart and the growth at heart. And I said, okay, this is a person who I think is able to take the school to a different level, completely different to what I experienced, you know. So it had to take a conversation like that for me to then come back and maybe watch some of the games and so on and be open-minded. And I've met some of the old boys and we've had conversations. And I know that there were those who didn't take my comments to heart when I mentioned them in the book. And the thing I was saying to them is that, but it's my book, I'm writing about my experiences, you know. It's nothing to do with talking negative about the school. It's my experience. And because it was such an early stage where we had just gone into democracy, so if I'm obviously leaving the school in 91, it gives you an idea of where we were politically. So, you couldn't.
I can only imagine.
So you couldn't blame me for being honest in my thoughts. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think it's a great part of the history of those schools for the first cohort of black students who went there to reflect on their experiences. We all accept that, the schools give you certain networks and ways of operating in the world that help you, but we need to document those early moments where the schools were grappling with very toxic cultures and there was abuse going on. There was overt racism. And and we all now kind of have to make sense of our relationship to those schools.
Yeah.
I've actually just stepped down from the council of St. John's, so I had a similar experience to you. Yeah, when my term came to an end, but I left the school. Then you start thinking about those memories and you're like, some of those things were just not on, But subsequently, the school's been on a very significant journey. Like the grade 8 cohort is now majority black.
Okay.
And, you go back into the governance of the school and you see it's a different place. Yeah. And so I think we all who've been through those schools trying to figure out, how much do we give back? How much do we renounce? And how do we take those institutions into the future of South Africa?
And they are needed because exactly what you're talking about, how things have changed.
Absolutely.
And I think the same thing with Hilton. It's a community. The thing is, some of these things are taught and parents play a big role in teaching them. But when you see kids and they interacting and they're playing and they're supporting each other, it doesn't matter what color they are. They do this and it's like, Dad, Tim's invited us to do this and this, and you don't even ask who's it, Tim Dlalose, or is it Tim Mackenzie? Tim's Tim, and it doesn't matter. You just, as long as you're good, cool, no problem. So I think the parents who still feel and live in those olden types of thinking are the ones that try and influence the kids, but they should just allow kids to be. If our country and our future is to depict that, it is such schools, because there are such good schools as well, that they shouldn't miss up on that opportunity to make kids and keep kids being kids and not influence their way of thinking. And I think, they've made a complete 360 and things are looking up and competitive enough academically, sporting wise. And that's all that really counts, is to have an active mind, to have extramurals, to just keep your mind active, be competitive in class, be competitive on the field.
What was it like for you going back after all those years?
I mean, you could tell that the school, one thing about it is it maintains. So whatever year it is, those buildings will remain those buildings. I think I just had a little geography thing, because one or two things have changed and there's a high performance center there now, so one or two things have been tweaked. So it took a little bit of self-orientating to find my way, but otherwise everything kind of brought back all sorts of different memories. It's still a great institution. I know everybody talks about the price and what it costs, and what do you say to that?
Your parents must have sacrificed so much to be able to put you in a position to be in and around Hilton, let alone like actually going there back at that time.
Oh gosh, I still don't believe. I mean, we and they mainly, they worked hard. We just had like a little farm store in Nkandla, and that managed to take my sisters. I have 3 sisters. Nomvula, Kuku, Vanessa, and myself, to take us through schools.
Amazing.
And, but like I said, we started with your Little Flowers, your Dlangezwas, and Nanda seminaries of this world. So you can't say that it was schools I didn't have those formative years to prepare me for an institution like that. It was like, shock to the system. So you basically fend for yourself, because you can tell that those kids, they've come from similar schools at primary school. So it's a continuation of the same, because they know almost everything about anything. And you are now, struggling, grappling, ducking, diving, not sure, where to place yourself. So, it's important. And education, I've found, is one of the key cornerstones that you can ever empower anybody on. And that is why I still thank my parents for their sacrifices that they made.
You mentioned Nkandla. How often did you visit Malala?
Hey!
Former President Zuma.
Hey, former president. Hey. No, I always say I have such fond memories, because not only is he a homeboy, obviously he's a much older man, but that's what you call ourselves. And, even when I was still staying in Yeoville, and I think he was also somewhere in the vicinity driving his green Camry in Hillbrow and so on. Hillbrow was a spot, Hillbrow had 3 sisters. It had all sorts of fancy restaurants that we couldn't afford. But we always formed a very good relationship, because there was always a fatherly type of person, so it'd see me, hey, Madluputu, hey, welcome, Fit. And like I was saying to you off air, that in my recent trip to Durban and back, I had, coincidentally, the honor of being with him on the same flight there and back. I've been to Malala on 2 occasions, because he always does like an annual get together for the kids, the school kids there. And it was a big marquee. It invited all the slaughtered cows, how, Mamkhize, that's what we do. And he had asked me to be present there, say a few things, and carried some of the kids as well that were at school. And then the other time was just more a meeting about trying to uplift the area of Nkandla, because since my parents had retired, we wanted to make sure that the community that we were trying to serve at the time don't lose all of that, but obviously a lot of things have happened in the time, and more criminality and just breaking things down. I think the thing that happens right around the country, you're starting to see a lot of that happen in the rural areas. But he was keen to assist, but obviously then his elevation into the presidency then took a lot of time then away from that particular project and trying to talk about it. But then I would meet him, I think when I was doing duty with Supersport, and there was golf days, and he would be the one to tee off and, begin. I think also the post-presidential State of the Nation address has always had the golf day the following day. So we met a couple of times on those type of occasions, and still do up until now.
Your career in broadcasting is, I was just preparing for this and just thinking like the different from Simunye, we are one, to like, and you're still going with one of the top radio shows in the country right now. I guess I have a question.
Yeah.
You're talking about uplifting Nkandla. You must have seen some crazy numbers, man. Like, can you just tell us some of those? Like, what are people offering Robert Marawa now? They must offer you like 2 billion a show or something.
2 billion. 2 billion cents. No. I think people always think our industry is laden with money, and it's not. And that's the sad part. So, you always feel and you understand, when whether it's artists or it's certain people that have been on TV as, I don't know, actors, musicians, broadcasters, then they fall on hard times, right? Because there's multiple ways. You're an independent contractor.
Yeah.
You signed up, taxman almost takes half of it all the time.
Yeah.
Then you still have to submit on your personal, or if you're running a business, you got to do the same. So there's a lot of things that as independent contractors, we've been maybe sidetracked on, and maybe we don't find sometimes the right people to do it, and you think you have made the right submissions, and then 2 years down the line they call you back and you have to now go to the SARS offices in Pretoria to answer for that, and yet you've done everything according to book. So there was no stage in your journey where you're trying to shortchange any of that. So I mean, what is a top earner? I don't even know what you call a top earner. Like with people that are on radio these days, I think the only one that was publicized was a Thibaut Touch. I think he walks around, with swagger these days, and you can tell. Maybe he must teach me how to negotiate a good contract.
I suspect you're quite, you know quite a lot about that. But, at the same time, like what you say about, it's an interesting industry because you can earn a lot, at least for a show or, when you get to the top.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's actually quite a lot of exploitation where the power dynamics are such that you can be told, we're done.
Immediately.
Yeah.
You would know.
Oh, yeah. No, I've got that SMS.
You would know.
Interesting one.
Yeah. You sign up on a piece of paper, you get fired on a text. I mean, isn't how beautiful life has become these days?
Yeah.
The disrespect and the funny thing, and you talk about money made. So like, for example, SABC, you're working on a show that's an hour, 30 minutes long every day.
Yeah.
But it's got a headline sponsor. It's got sponsors in between. And I only knew this last year. Bumped into somebody, I think he had worked at SABC, and he said to me, Robert, how did you manage to make so much money for the SABC just for your show? So I said, what do you mean? I don't know, because we're not privy to that. So you just know, here's a sponsor, here's a live read. But obviously lots of money is being made because we don't have a claim to a percentage of whatever they are making or whatever you bring. Sometimes sponsors, and I know one of the telcos that sponsored the show, they had put on their contract that we're going to renew for another 5 years, but provided that Robert is still the anchor. So if I'm not there, they're not going to be signing up.
Wow.
But I have not a claim to that they have a claim towards me being there for them to sponsor the show. So he said, how did you make so much money for the SABC with just an hour and a half show?
Yeah.
So I said, what do you mean? And he said, no. Do you know that per year you made 46 million rand for the SABC?
46?
Yeah. I said, for what? I said, 46.
Wow. Per year?
Per year.
Wow.
And I was like, I have no clue. Dude, this is the first time anybody has told me any numbers about anything. The only thing I knew was information I've shared before in previous interviews that, we were the only show in 2002 on Metro when we're doing the simulcast that had double figures for a per 30-second slot or per 30-second advert.
Crazy numbers.
Yeah, but we were just this mere sports talk show. But that was pumping in a lot of money for the broadcaster.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that if you're, let's say, on an international, and there's no way you would have had to have a claim towards that they're making profit on. So here we get rewarded by, hey, Rob, listen, it's a Friday. You've won an SA Radio Award, and by the way, don't come to work. We're okay.
Yeah,
we're done with you.
Yeah,
that was how it literally ended that Friday.
It's tough, man, and like the public almost felt like something of ours had been taken.
I mean, I've always, sorry, Caesar, I've always been grateful to who I call the shareholders, who I call the listeners of the show, for their immense support. I mean, I was just fulfilling a dream, a calling, a love for broadcasting, but also just a love for doing things differently. I always say I'm not here to tell people what the cricket score, the football score is, because people know these days what the scores are.
Yeah.
But it also helps when you bring in, maybe it also caused the many fights that I ended up having with, some people that were close friends, like Fikile Mbalula, for example, when he was the minister. The whole thing that was causing that was about transformation. And we had the room dividers talking about rugby and, holding him accountable for the fact that we are not holding up our transformation mandate that has been put on paper. So minister, what is it that you're doing? But you falling short on this and that and that. And it didn't sit kindly, But at the same time, we were not going to hold back I mean, the platform was there. It was allowing us to do that. And that for me was refreshing because, I could name you 4 cricketers that decided to unfollow me immediately, that we started talking about the cricket stories and the racism and the Makayantinis and everybody else that was a part of it. But that brought about a hearing where Advocate Dumisani Ntsebeza was then chairing that. And that's where all these horror stories started to come out about the maltreatment of the black cricketers at the time. So people didn't want to know and hear about that because now we're opening up those old wounds. But the thing is, it's ripe because those players want to talk about it. And the thing is, they were great cricketers and about Tsotsobe and them. And the thing is, you look at their journeys and you say, my goodness, we fell very short. Until today, we haven't won a Cricket World Cup at that senior level. We've come short. And I've always said that one day when we have a fully transformed Proteas team, we will win a Cricket World Cup. So I reiterate those words that I said almost 10 years ago. And 10 years later, we still haven't. So I am also encouraged when I see somebody like a Shukri Conrad, who is now there, and he should be literally just coaching all of the Proteas. He's a person who has the dynamism to go all the way and coach cricket to its glory. And we will find glory in him. I mean, I had the privilege when we hosted the Cricket World Cup here in South Africa, 2003, and the same human being, me, who knew nothing about cricket, was asked by the SABC to do a breakfast show called How's That? And my co-host was Shukri Conrad back in those days.
Wow.
And I say that because I know the man. I haven't seen him in many years, but I know the man's resolve, and also somebody who was able to also guide me and help me where I was falling short in terms of some of the, like with every sport, the rules change and rugby rules change, football rules change, and the laws of the game.
Yeah.
He had the time and the patience to do that. So I just think that if we want to live in this glory of what the Springboks have been able to do, we need the Rassie Erasmus of cricket, and the only Rassie Erasmus of cricket we have is Shukri Conrad.
With regard to broadcasting, I mean, at the height of your schedule, what was the working schedule looking like? Because many people think lawyers work hard and doctors work hard. I'm not going to lie. When I was on the SABC at prime time,
Sweating.
I've never felt that amount of pressure. And like, it was a 1 hour show, but you've got to prep and then you've got to recover, and you've just the lights and the whole country's watching you. I've never felt that I've worked so hard on that show. What was your schedule like at the height?
No, it's draining, and I think that's part of what people don't realize. Sometimes people say, "Oh, but you're just doing a 1 hour show. Oh, but you're just doing a 3 hour show." Yeah, but you don't just wake up and you switch on a microphone. That's disrespect to the audience. Radio. Okay, let me start off with television because you were talking about that. TV is a beast. It is, and
I don't know how you do both, like radio and TV. My mind would explode.
No, but you know why? I love live. I am not somebody who can do pre-record, so I struggled with that. I struggled with it because when Titch Mataz, for example, was deported back to Zuma, and he was doing Was a Weekend with Brafats and Sisno Temba Matumo. I happened to be around Urban Brew at the time, and they were like, "Hey, please come in and stand in." And I did a couple of shows probably for about a month or so before he came back. That was my biggest struggle. You would get there, they say get there at 12, you start recording at 1, and then at 3 o'clock, there's a break for lunch, and then somewhere there's a sound problem, cut, there's a light problem, cut, and so for a 30-minute show, you're there for like 5 hours. So that made no sense. So I love live. And that's what always keeps me on the edge. So you get there. I mean, I would race from, people will ask, how the hell do you manage to move from the SABC? You leave at 7:30, by 8 o'clock, we're seeing you doing Champions League in Randburg at Supersport. And I had to kind of learn how to, get up and go and do things. So you move from talking rugby on a Tuesday, You zoom across to Randburg and you quickly put on a jacket there. They put powder in your face and earpiece and everything else. And then you can't even greet. You only greet John Barnes and Sean Bartlett and Tim Sherwood at halftime, you know, when the game has started and you're like, guys, hey, sorry, man, how's it? Because you literally arrive and you go on there. There's no auto cue. There's no nothing. It's all from you.
So you would just do it, no auto cue,
I never used auto cue. Sport, at Supersport, I never saw an auto cue.
Yeah.
And that's how sport should be. It should be your level of knowledge that you bring in. So you have to research. You have to sleep 3 a.m. or beyond. And remember, Champions League is 5 games that are shown live. So that's 10 teams worth of research for one day.
You must know those Shakhtar Donetsk players.
I know, Club Brugge. And So those are all the things that, for me, made television exciting. Was just that. Yes, it's frustrating and there's people talking in your ear the whole time and you're trying to listen, but you're also trying to talk as well. But that's part of the skill set that you eventually learn. So I don't blame you. But it's
rough.
It's
It's rough there in Auckland Park, but yeah.
Auckland Park should never be rough. That public broadcaster is a public broadcaster accessible to everybody in this country. That public broadcaster should do what Peter McClary did to it in turning it around.
Sure.
We're still highly invested in it. We still love it. We all love it. And I think if one day common minds got together to say, guys, listen, here's a broadcaster. Do the same thing that the BBC did.
Wow.
And you change its fortunes. Then again, the sponsors, people, the investors, they start streaming back again to that. You know, you're not going to get through the data thing overnight. So there's still people that heavily rely on the SABC.
Absolutely.
You know, so I see some of the channels, they do all these quizzes late at night and you have to see if the elephant is missing a tail or this, you know, so those are things, again, sure, maybe they might be sponsored.
Yeah.
But how are you utilizing that time? Not everyone sleeps at the same time. And I think that's what people don't realize. Your working time is somebody else's sleep time. Their sleep time is somebody else's work time. You know, so that is why when there's breaking news these days on the so-called 24-hour news channels, there's nobody that's there. You know, the unfortunate shooting at Solo, for example, that was only covered in the morning, but it happened around about 11. A lot of the broadcasters are in and around who could have quickly gone there and spoken about it. And I suppose, other incidents that have happened, the imprisonment of, you know, the former president, Jacob Zuma. I think I only remember Mamkhize, he was the one who was on top of that story. All the other channels that had shut down at the time. So are you really 24 hours? Or you 24 hours but looping stuff from during the day? You know, because there should always be a standby person in case something big happens. And I think these days, you know, these stories break at crazy hours.
Sometimes we're breaking news before like
anybody else,
the podcasters, you know, and it shouldn't be that way, to be honest.
I know. But that's where you've led, though, because it's also about the line of questioning. You're not questioning about the today. You're questioning people about what is likely to happen, getting their thoughts, getting their mission of where the country should be. And that's where opportunistically then people start to take clips from your show and say, but this is what was said already. You know, so that is how you become a leader in the space. There's
a question about interviews, and as someone who's done so many interviews of different people, I'm curious, because there's the hard-hitting interview where you really are pressing for accountability, and then there's the sit-back interview where you're allowing your audience to go into the mind of your guest. I tend to do a lot of the second one.
Okay.
But that's not to say I don't have respect for those who do the first one. I think both should live and exist. But I feel like my version is looked down on because people think you're being soft. And I'm like, yeah, but would you have learned that thing that you learned if I was antagonizing the guest the whole interview? What's your thought on the interview, you know, having done so many important ones?
I mean, that's a brilliant question, because a recent example, there's a gentleman called Babu Joe Hudla. So Joe Hudla is a very famous Zulu commentator on radio. I've been trying to get him to do the Legends part of my show, which we do on a Friday. It's a celebration. You're a legend. Well done. We say thank you. We give you flowers. But for 12 years, he said no. And I know, Bob Joe, there's no issue, there's no beef, there's no nothing. He just plain said no, he can't. Every year you try it. So yeah, I mean, he's joined the family of Hollywood Bets as an ambassador now and a content creator and so on.
Nice.
So I think also with their help, they were able to nudge him along and say, listen, it's a harmless platform.
Yeah.
Says, no, but hey, Robert, his questions are... So that's what was stressing him, was that he was likening what we were potentially going to do to what, let's say, we've done with the Danny Jordan or some of the hard-hitting interviews with some of the sports administrators before. So he thought, I'm here for the lashing. Maybe he's done something. I've got information about him. And yet the transition is seamless. I also love the medium for what I can extract out of the guest. So those I find great pleasure in doing with research to toe. The hard-hitting ones obviously take massive research. And you have to be pinpoint in terms of your facts because those can easily turn around and you become the fool and your career is now dead and buried because why? You didn't take the time to go and research that you're going to ask your guest. And also, and sometimes it doesn't have to be loud. People think it has to be a loud interview and you're going to go in hard. No, you can have an interview where you just simply, in this tone, and you ask and you say, so you said the last time when you went to Old Trafford, you guys had a great time and, you traveled and it was a nice business class trip that you had and you'd be like, no, jeez, it was nice, we sat business class and you say, but didn't company X pay for that trip? And all of a sudden the jaw drops and it's like, well, what do you mean? And then the person starts fighting for words and he develops a stutter that he never had in the first place for the entire interview. So you can do that very calmly. Yes, the temperature post that will rise. But as long as you're confident with what you have as far as information and backup information and double, triple backup information, you're good. He's not. And he's the one who'll have to prove himself without becoming emotional. But they will because they use the emotional side to sidetrack from the actual question that you're asking. Can
you remember what you think is your most challenging moment in an interview? Or does one spring to mind? I know you've spoken a lot about like the Mandela interviews when that's your favorite, but what was one of the hardest ones?
There've been quite a few heated debates within the football sector. Trying to think. When you've gone through so many, some come with threats and all sorts of things. I think it might have been it would have been a football related interview. And I remember the guest standing up and he walked out. Because there was an instruction, I think, then that we shouldn't take any calls. But then the nature of the show is interactive, so you have to take calls. So I think that sparked the anger. And the guest decided to walk out.
I've never had that yet.
Well, have you interviewed Bantu Holomisa?
I have actually, yeah.
And how was it? Cordial.
Well, it went pretty well, actually.
I mean, he's a good friend. But I remember interviews he's had.
Interesting.
Where he's literally taken the earpiece off. I think it was Leslie. I forget his surname, but it was on SABC back then. And he said, "But this is not what you said or called me in to talk about."
So I'm off.
And he took the earpiece off, took the microphone off, and off he went. I remember the dramatic one with Umtono Pindangene. Yes, Fiso this. So so those are some of the memorable ones when real political engagement was heated.
Yeah.
I mean, so it happens. It happens a lot, and people are never happy. I always say, why subject yourself? Rather say no. I mean, obviously, a strange one I had was, and she's always difficult to interview, is Mamkhize. As much as one knows the lady,
sure.
At times when the questions start to get a bit tough, then she'll throw it back to you. So she does that whole thing of absorb, and then throw it back to you. So there are a few that sit there on the YouTube platforms there across, and others that have been clipped, where when you look back and you say, oh, okay, she was avoiding answering this or that. Obviously, as a human being, sure, she is and who she is. But when it comes to interviews, and it's within a sport now that she's decided to be a part of. So there are questions that I've got to ask.
Sure.
That might not sit well with you, and it's unfortunate that the club finds itself now where it is.
You have been in ICU, is it 4 times?
Eesh. Who's counting?
Yeah, because I was realizing 3, but then I read an interesting article which spoke about another time.
Yeah. It's about 4. It's about 4. 2006, first major heart attack.
Yeah.
2018, second heart attack. Then there was an incident. So that incident that literally more than a heart attack brought me within quarter 2 of meeting Tupac.
Wow.
Yeah. That one was serious. But it was an attack. It was an attack on me. 6 specialists were brought in where they couldn't find anything. I literally did all the blood tests that are on that sheet that when you go to these labs and they give it to you. There was nothing that I didn't do a test on. They couldn't find anything. But I was finished. I was literally dead man walking.
Wow.
So that one, I remember my sister Nomvula walking in because the nurses didn't want to allow her in to the ward, and I could hear the commotion. And then she was like, no, I'm medically trained. I know how to handle this. And like, you're not ready for what you're about to see. And then she eventually, got her way in. And as she opened the door, I remember her face just sinking. So whatever she saw in me, as a former nurse herself, she had never seen anything like that.
You had already had a heart attack by that time.
No, this had nothing to do with the heart attack.
Yeah.
So this is
she
like
had seen you like.
So she had seen me with the heart attacks the 2 before.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this time.
So this time now, with this particular incident, it was nothing like a heart attack. Nothing like it.
Yeah.
So I thank so many. I thank so many people. I thank my family. I always say I thank them for the support. But obviously I always say I thank God for the guidance and the protection that He has given me. And the ability to live and tell the story and continue with what I do. Was I actually got to that stage with that incident. I never thought I'd be able to talk.
Yeah.
Because so one of my lungs was gone as well as a part of it. I never ever thought, like I could hardly say a word that came out. I couldn't even tie my shoelaces. It was it was the most dire situations I've ever been in my life. Yes, I did get COVID. So COVID was the next one that got me back into ICU.
Yeah.
And I was in Durban at the time. So remember, I had just been now officially unemployed on all platforms, in 2019.
Yeah.
And I was at home and I was spending time for the first time with my mother and enjoying that moment. Then obviously COVID was creeping around, and my doctor friend from the UK, Dr. Sangla, said, no, if your blood oxygen is reading at that, you need to go to the hospital right now. And I went to hospital. I was in the normal ward for 1 day. Next day, you are in ICU.
Sure.
So in your ICU, it's glass. You see all the people around, and it's well lit so that the nurses and everybody can see if there's anything that needs their attention. And you wake up in the middle of the night, and the certain man you saw there, the lady you saw there, they're no longer there. They're busy with the mattress, and you ask, and they say, no, they passed on. So those thoughts start to creep, and you're like, damn, am I next? And then the first thing, you keep looking up at the screen, like, how's my oxygen? How's the lung capacity? And you're just hoping for the best, So I've journeyed. I know the inside of an ICU very well, and it's not pleasant. I never would even let my closest friends know. Sometimes they'll be shocked. I would be in ICU, and there's a group of friends of ours that we have a WhatsApp group with, and we chat now and again, update each other, talk nonsense.
Sure.
And I would react, but I'm literally in ICU, but I'm reacting like nothing's happened. I haven't told any of them that this is going on, because I never wanted sympathy from anybody. I was like, if this is a fight I have to fight, then let it be.
Sure.
And it was the first time I'd been in the back of an ambulance, and the ambulance came through to pick me up. And it was a long drive, but it was a drive that I guess with the many, many doctors and medical people that I don't have their permission to mention them by name, but they know who they are, really made sure that this human being is still here. And I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful for life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw in an interview you did with DJ Fresh that you thought that there was an attempt made on your life with the third one, which just came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Do you still believe that was the case?
100%. 100%. It was, and the fact that it was such a medical mystery made it even more so. Yeah. So they always say be careful in life, but you can never be careful more than you should.
Yeah.
What are you being careful of? What are people wanting from you? My job as a broadcaster, I sit on radio and I sit on television. Well, then, I'm on TV today, so thanks to you for making that happen. But more than that, it's a denial of open conversations and dialogue, because we're not outing people. We're inviting them. Let's have a conversation. Let's have a chat, but also let's interrogate certain issues. Now, if you feel that is in any way exposing other people, then don't accept those. Don't, then keep away, then don't engage, and let's not talk. So it was a direct hit, and it was very personal. It was aimed at really putting me out and ending my career. Yeah.
I'm so glad that it didn't succeed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
What are the lessons that you've learned from 4 visits to ICU?
It's many lessons. It's to be grateful. It's to be grateful for the small things. It really is to be grateful. I'm grateful for the big things, which is family. I'm grateful for big things, which is friends and people that really care, that came to the fore. I'm grateful to know God, and I'm grateful that I'm from a product of a grandfather who was an Anglican archbishop who became somebody who was a big influence in my life, even if you might not have known it, So I'm grateful for those things, because you then journey back in terms of life and its meaning and what made sense and what helped to chart a way this way or that way for yourself. And that for me is what I'm grateful for. It's not pleasant at all being in ICU. I always say that when the doctor from Sunninghill, who was the first person to see me, and he told me about the 23 minutes, that's literally all I had between life and death. And had I not used that time, I would not be alive, was literally 23 minutes. And a lot of the time was used, as I've mentioned on different platforms, but I like to reiterate it, is about the medical aid. So the ambulance is there, it stopped, and you're inside. and we're trying to find a medical aid card, and they can't. So they have to decide, are they going to drive from Rivonia Road to Baragwanath, or they're going to go just down the road to Sunninghill Hospital. That's all it was. So had we not found that, or we didn't, I just had to think, oh, damn, my ENT doctor is at Sunninghill, so let's quickly call him, and he'll be able to give them my medical aid information. But had that not happened, I would have been on I wouldn't have gone past Gordon Road going to Bara.
Sure. Yeah, it speaks to the inequalities in our society, and like having that card is life and death.
Yeah, it's inequality. It's the healthcare system. It's what the great man that I admire, who does his job, whether it's at Home Affairs or back to his medical profession, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, fights for every time, is to try and get a level of equality.
Yeah.
And as you guys have said on this platform before, it's a bit difficult when you got porous borders and you can't really control things. And the hospitals are flooded by people who ordinarily or in any other country would not be there because you're not there legally.
Well, it's South Africa's great credit that you're still with us, and going strong with.
We try.
An excellent show at the moment, which is generating views as ever.
Thank you.
And a platform that you can also take wherever you go now, which was a very smart move.
No, I know. I've had to be a technical person carrying a little kid to Rwanda. I had to take it recently when I went for the NBA All-Stars in San Francisco, and you communicating with your team in Joburg, and they're saying that plug in there.
Yeah.
And the next thing, you sitting around at a table and you're having a proper interview that sounds like you're in a professional studio.
Yeah.
So that has worked. And that's the world that we are in, is that sometimes I get invited for events in my own individual capacity, right? And then I say, no, man, but I got a radio show. How about if we double it up? And the guys say, great, can we? What are the costs, or what's the factors that can help influence it? Because if it's too big an event, then I can't control that. I need technical people to do that. But half the time it works, and the listeners,
amazing,
the beneficiary of all of that. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for me and this platform?
Doc, what you've done and what you've started is something that you're going to carry on with for a very, very long time. There's a lot of credibility that comes with you. There's a lot of credibility that comes with your name, what you've created of your name. You branching off into this medium has given people greater insight. There's nothing that you can take away from an intellect of an individual. Their greater knowledge, their skill, one thing I realized with your previous interviews is what other people don't have, the ability to listen.
So important.
So sometimes anchors want to be the anchor and the guest at the same time. And you can't do that. You can't ask and answer your own questions. So I think what you've done brilliantly is afford people that. So when people criticize you, as you mentioned earlier, for not being too, controversial and so on, is that there's no need for that. People put themselves into the controversy by saying the things. You're not the one who's dragging them to say it.
Sure.
So I think the only advice really is keep doing what you're doing, keep getting the big persons and getting the ones that are deemed not so important, because actually those are the people that are important, whose voices are shut down. The ability to pass that microphone through to somebody that never thought they would be able to be heard helps to shape so many people's lives. From a musical perspective, I always say there was a guy who was in the streets of New York being seen as a beggar, and he became a one-hit wonder with one very particular song, and he disappeared, but he got his opportunity. His name was Michael Speaks, and he got to show and share to the world what he was able to deliver. So I think long may your show continue.
Thank you.
Now you got the freedom. You're not going to get that call to say, hey, it's elections, baba. Go easy with the politicians. That doesn't need to happen. Our politicians need to be held accountable because the country is on its knees right now.
For sure. Thank you for gracing this platform. It's a major milestone, and as long as you know that you are a legend and as someone I've looked up to,
thank you.
Then my work today has been done.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks, Doc. Highly appreciate it.
Indeed.
May I ask for that quickly? I know these things are not done here. Never mind about this label. I had to just grab something.
Yeah.
But the important thing is, as people who like to give, these are 2 wonderful caps for you.
Thank you so much. The legendary cap. Let me put it on now.
So that's the cap.
Yeah, this is cool. Okay.
Yeah, look at you.
We're going to give you an SMWX hoodie as you go as well.
Yeah, so that's for you. And just to say, keep up the great work.
Thank you
see,
so
we
much.
watch, we listen, and we just wanted to doff you. I know it's not at university here. You've been doffed enough. So this is just our little gentle way of saying.
Thank you, sir. Absolutely. You know what? Just from time to time,
work.
I'm going to just wear this on the show, and those who'll know will know.
Will know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look how cool you look, man.
Thank you so much. That's
pleasure.
Very special. Yeah, and we're done. CT boom. Aye.
Yay! You gave that a remix, eh?